Hello, everyone, and welcome back to American Ultras Talk. Mauricio Pochettino's first competitive USMNT roster just dropped for the CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals, home and away against Jamaica, which will determine a spot in the semifinals and final that will take place next year. Of course, we have had so much success in this tournament, and it's one of the only competitive things we have outside of the Gold Cup before the 2026 World Cup at home, so it's very important that we continue to do well in this competition and take it as seriously as possible. Now, Pochettino didn't get off to the best of starts, a little bit of a mixed bag in his first camp, but in this one, despite that, a lot of the same players come in. Some players return from injury. There's a couple new faces, but we're going to just break down the roster for you, all 25 players. Unfortunately, Yuri couldn't be here, but we decided it'd still be best to get out a video for you guys, breaking down the roster, analyzing it, some of the selections, some of the missed players. So without further ado, let's just get into the roster. Now, one quick note before we jump into the goalkeepers is that there are 25 players on the roster, like I said. Now, for the CONCACAF Nations League, only 23 can make the squad, which means 2 of them will not make the cut. Now, since we have 4 goalkeepers, one of those keepers will probably be a cut. I believe 3 keepers are actually required, which means it will probably be 3 of the keepers, only 1 keeper getting cut, and then the other cut will probably come from, if I had to guess, Chris Richards, just because he just came back from injury. However, it could be someone else. We're just going to have to wait and see. Now, jumping into the 4 goalkeepers, one of which will be cut, and I think that one will probably be the first one listed here, Diego Cochen from Barcelona Athletic. It's interesting that they actually listed him as from Athletic because obviously he does have a first-team contract. He's been a bench player for them several times, but he has been a consistent starter, or relatively consistent when healthy, for Barca Athletic, their second team, and he's been doing relatively well, continuing to impress. I like the fact that he's here. This is his first camp under Poch. He did make it in the camp under Mikey Varas, the one before Pochettino was officially announced, but in Pochettino's first camp last time, he was injured. Now, he might not still have made it, but he was injured, so he couldn't have. Now he's back from injury, playing again at the club level, and it's nice to see him here. Hopefully he impresses Poch because he is probably the goalkeeper of the future. However, for now, I think it's pretty clear he's probably the worst in terms of quality of the 4, so I expect him to unfortunately not make either of the matchday squads against Jamaica. The next goalkeeper we have is Patrick Schulte from the Columbus Crew. I would really like to see Patrick Schulte get a chance in one of these games. I know it might not be the best time to experiment since it is a competitive fixture, home and away, 2 legs. We could stand a chance of getting knocked out, especially if we look back at the last time we were in the CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals against Trinidad and Tobago. We struggled on the road, ended up losing that game, going through still because of the home win, and as well the last game against Jamaica. We needed a 96th minute equalizer to even force extra time. That was in the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals, and then of course won in extra time, but it's not going to be a pushover. We're going to need to take these seriously. I still think Schulte deserves a chance because he hasn't got one under Poch yet to start a game. I do think he is on par with Matt Turner right now and has a much better chance at being the better player for the 2026 World Cup. I would probably start him. I don't think he will, however. Zach Steffen is the third one, and this one it just makes absolutely 0 sense. I'm sorry. He's one of the worst goalkeepers in MLS. You can look at the stats to back it up, the eye test as well. It's just all around not been a good season for Steffen back in MLS with the Colorado Rapids. The Rapids had some decent success on their own level, but Steffen wasn't really a major contributor to that. I think the only part of the season that you could say maybe he was in good form was Leagues Cup, but we all know how we should feel about Leagues Cup. It's a made-up money grab competition. The form there, I don't even take that into consideration anyways. When it mattered most in MLS and in the playoffs, he was bad. Matt Freese should absolutely be here over him. Just had several monster saves in a penalty shootout to knock out higher seed FC Cincinnati in the MLS playoffs, and he's been the best American keeper in MLS all season. He's also, I think 4 years younger than Zach Steffen, could be more. So the fact that he's not here, I think, is kind of criminal. Hopefully he gets a chance at some point. Maybe it's Camp Cupcake in January. Maybe it's sometime later, but he definitely deserves a look. The last keeper here is Matt Turner. Not much to say here. He's played 1 game with Crystal Palace. It was a cup game. He conceded kind of a sloppy goal, made some nice saves, was bad with his feet. Just the Turner we know. He's been the starting keeper for Poch in both of the 2 games. I see no reason for that to change. He'll be the starter here. Now, moving on to the defenders. There's 7 here. We have Mark McKenzie from Toulouse. We have Tim Ream from Charlotte FC, who just also got a playoff game against Orlando City in MLS. They ultimately ended up losing, unfortunately for Ream. But Pochettino was actually at that game. Chris Richards from Crystal Palace is back from injury and in the squad. Now, he hasn't actually played for Crystal Palace yet, which was mildly concerning. He did make the bench for their last game over the weekend. It was his first game back. I don't believe he featured, so I think there's going to be a little bit of injury precautions, or at least I hope there is in this camp, but it's nice to have him with the group regardless. It'll be nice for him to get integrated with Poch, learn the system a little bit. Anthony Robinson is also here from Fulham. Miles Robinson is here from FC Cincinnati. Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach, and Austin Trusty from Celtic. Now, a notable absence is Austin Trusty's center back duo partner at Celtic, Cameron Carter-Vickers. He had an injury precaution, didn't play over the weekend because of the bad pitch at Kilmarnock. It's not a serious injury, but he's not in this camp. It's important to remember that Pochettino does know Cameron Carter-Vickers from their time together at Tottenham Hotspur, where he continuously loaned him out, eventually sold him. As we said, when CCV got the opportunity at Spurs, he wasn't very good, so we'll have to see how highly Poch rates him when he is fully healthy, probably in the next camp, probably coming March in the Nations League semifinals and final, assuming we do make it there. I think the main thing to point out here is the lack of fullback options. Besides Scally and Jedi, there's nobody. There's no Marlon Fossey as a backup right back, who allegedly was supposed to start the game against Panama last camp, so it's very interesting to not see him here. There's no Christopher Lund as a backup left back. He's been benched for Palermo. Probably the right call to not bring him in, although the fact that there aren't any backups to replace Lund or Fossey, I think is kind of strange. To me, this points towards probably a back three formation with 3 center backs, maybe Scally as a right center back, Jedi maybe as a wing back, and then you have Mark McKenzie, maybe Tim Ream as the other 2, maybe Trusty goes in there. I just think it makes the most sense because if Scally were to go down, I know Poch did say that some of the other players in the camp can play there. He cited Yunus Musa's game against Real Madrid in the Champions League this past week, where he did play a little bit at right back. I just don't think putting the likes of him, Weston McKennie, Tim Weah there makes sense for the team. It's just weakening the players by playing them out of position. I'd much rather either play a back 3, experiment with that a little bit, or just have Scally there. Realistically, without an injury, and we hope, obviously, there are no injuries, Scally and Jedi will go the full 90 both games, but not having a single backup at either of the fullback positions, I think is a little bit short-sighted. I personally would have brought in John Tolkien as a backup left back, had a great season with New York Red Bulls in MLS, is likely to get a move to Europe in winter. I think he deserves a chance, especially after his stellar Olympics, but he's not called up here. For the center backs, not much more to say. Miles Robinson showed last camp that he absolutely does not deserve another call-up. I would have rather seen Walker Zimmerman, but it does kind of make sense that he's here again. Poch is kind of valuing continuity, at least within the USMNT, and trying to build a core group. Hopefully, he doesn't see the pitch at all. I don't see why he would with better options there, but we're just going to have to wait and see. And now moving on to the 8 midfielders that we have here. We have Brendan Aronson, number 10 from Leeds United, Gianluca Busio, box-to-box from Venezia, Johnny Cardoso, number 6 from Real Betis, Weston McKennie, a traditional 8 from Juventus, Aidan Morris, another 6 from Middlesbrough, Yunus Musa, of course, box-to-box from AC Milan, Tanner Tessman, the 6 from Olympique Lyon, and Malik Tillman, the number 10 from PSV Eindhoven. Now, for the midfield, I think it is pretty straightforward here. Johnny Cardoso comes into his first camp with the USMNT under Poch. Hopefully he gets to impress because, let's be honest, Johnny's form for the USMNT has basically been non-existent. He's been very good for Real Betis last season since he joined them, and this season as well. Especially recently, he's been taking it to a new level. So hopefully he can integrate his form from club level over to the national team under Poch, because we know there's a great player there. Same story for Malik Tillman at the 10. He didn't really impress last camp under Poch. He actually was there, although it didn't really look like it, despite the fact that he played against Mexico. But regardless, he's probably going to get another prime opportunity here with Gio Reyna still out injured. Luca De La Torre, by the way, is also still out injured. That's why he wasn't even in consideration, although, to be honest, I think we've moved past the need for Luca De La Torre, but it's still a notable injury that I think is worth mentioning. Tyler Adams also just came back from injury. He actually started his first game of the season for Bournemouth, this past weekend, and despite that, he's actually not in the camp. I do think this is the right call, just because we've seen so many times in the past rushing back Tyler Adams from injury, playing him so quickly with the USMNT, especially the style of play that he has as a 6, kind of being frantic all over the place, winning into duels, kind of being a little bit reckless, showing the fight, all that kinds of stuff, kind of makes him a little bit more prone to re-aggravating his injuries. So it's good that we're taking it slow. I just kind of wish the same logic had been applied to Chris Richards as well, because he's one of our most important center backs, and Crystal Palace really need him to be healthy. So if he re-aggravates it, it's going to be a lose-lose for him, for the club, for the national team, for everyone. So hopefully he doesn't see the pitch too much. But for Adams, I think it is a good decision, especially since we have Johnny Cardoso, Aiden Morris, Tanner Tessman at the 6, who are more than capable of filling in. Also, of course, the 8s in Busio, McKennie, and Musa that can also play in the double pivot. The competition is on. There's a lot of players there. Personally, I would like to see Tanner Tessman get a little bit more of an extended look. I definitely know Yuri would as well. I feel like he didn't get enough minutes last camp, and when he did play, I thought he was one of the few players, especially against Mexico, that kind of impressed. So I hope he at least plays over Morris at the very least. If Poch wants to give a chance to Johnny Cardoso, I do understand that, given his form and the fact that he hasn't seen him yet. Brendan Aronson, there's not much to say about him. I just feel like he's the only one I haven't mentioned. It's possibly he's used out on the wing, but our options there are a little bit more, well, there than last camp. I mean, last camp we had, one, maybe 2 true wingers. This camp we have a lot more. So it'll be interesting to see how Aronson fits into the team. I think he is a player that Poch likes a lot, but with the current roster complexion, I just don't know if there's a spot for him. Maybe as a super sub, who knows. Now, onto the forwards, the final position group of the roster. We have Cade Cowell coming into the group as a replacement for Haji Wright, who unfortunately did get injured for Coventry City despite scoring a goal. He's in red hot form. Comes at such a bad time for Haji. I really feel bad for him, because in this camp, I think he had a lot of opportunities to do really well, get extended minutes because of the situations on the wing and up top, which he can both play. We'll get into that in a little bit. Ricardo Pepi is also here from PSV Eindhoven in sensational form. 3rd in the Golden Boot race in the Eredivisie, tied for 1st if you remove penalty goals. He's on absolute fire, and that's without starting most of the games too. So once he gets into the starting lineup for club and hopefully for country, he's going to be absolutely cooking. It's going to be a big chance for him here against Jamaica. He's probably going to start both games, since the only other striker we have in camp is Brandon Vasquez. You see him from Monterrey Rayados in Liga MX. Sargent did just get a long-term injury. Balogun is still out from his long-term injury. Hopefully Balogun will be back soon. Sargent not so much, but for now, Pepi, it's time for to seize your opportunity, and I think if he does, he could even be in the argument to be starting when Balogun and Sargent are both back healthy. Realistically, it's probably just between Pepi and Balogun at this point. Sargent's kind of missed his chance a little bit. I am actually excited to see Brandon Vasquez again here, because I think he will get a little bit more of minutes than he did in the last camp, and in the 20 or so minutes he played against Mexico, I actually thought he was one of the few players who impressed, was actually looking to do something, got through on goal one time, had a chance. So hopefully he gets a couple more minutes, gets to show his worth. He is definitely a different profile striker from anyone else we have. Other players here to finish it out: Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, and Alejandro Zendejas, another Liga MX player. Very interesting that all 3 of our Liga MX guys were called in. Zendejas, I don't think he's going to be a popular inclusion here, but again, similar to Vasquez, he's probably the only player who actually showed fight against Mexico once he came off the bench. So I'm actually not really mad about his inclusion here. Plus, his form at Club America has been pretty solid over the last year, and he even I think scored recently. Maybe it was an assist, I can't remember, but I know he got a goal contribution of some sort, I think in their last game. It was a 5-0 win over somebody. So I'm not too mad to see him here. The one I am a little bit perplexed about is Cade Cowell, just because, let's face it, I mean, his form in MLS the last season he was in was atrocious. He didn't make the Olympic team, and rightly so. For Chivas, he had a little bit of a purple patch where he was on form, but then got hurt. He hasn't necessarily been the exact same player since going back. Not to say he's been bad, I just don't think he's been lighting it up. And when you have players like Paxton Aronson, who's one of the best players on Utrecht, who are currently second in the Eredivisie, ahead of huge clubs like Feyenoord, like Ajax, they're only 2 points behind PSV, and we know how good PSV are. We've got so many of their players in our national team conversation. 2 of them are in this camp. You have Ledesma, who some people have been saying definitely deserves a chance. I think that's a little bit short-sighted, but regardless, Paxton Aronson definitely deserves a chance. I'm very disappointed he's not here. I know he is more of an 8. He's been even playing as a holding midfielder at times for Utrecht. He kind of just plays everywhere. Even as a winger out of position, I'd rather have him here than Cowell. At the end of the day, you want the talent, you want the potential, and I think Paxton just has more of that than Cowell right now and probably for the future. Diego Luna as well deserves a call-up. If you're going to call up a player who's kind of domestic-based, I know Liga MX technically isn't domestic, but it's still within North America. Diego Luna's been so good in MLS this season, winning Young Player of the Season for Real Salt Lake. So many goals, so many assists, so instrumental on the left-hand side of the midfield for them. And honestly, I mean, again, it's a situation where, yes, his best position probably isn't on the wing, but he's been playing there a lot, even more than Paxton has, for example, another player who I said I'd like to see. And I think he's definitely much better than Cade Cowell. I mean, let's just look at the Olympic squad, for example. When the roster was announced, there was a lot of outrage about no Diego Luna, not so much outrage about no Cade Cowell. I think that speaks volumes to where the players are at in their careers and probably their potential as well. Plus, there's also the chance that Luna could end up switching to Mexico. And honestly, at this point, considering how much he's been snubbed for the U.S., I wouldn't blame him if he considers it. So that could be a big loss for the future. Only other real talking point here is Tim Weah. It's his first camp under Pochettino. He obviously just came back from injury right after the last camp. He's been on fire, scoring in every single one of his starts for Juventus so far. Hopefully he translates it to the USMNT, because let's face it, in the last camp we had Yunus Musa playing out on the wing. That's not even his position, and he just didn't really do so much. So having Weah there, and Poch spoke very highly about him in his press conference as well, I think that's going to be a huge boost. Excited to see what he can do, especially partnering Pulisic. I think we should also maybe experiment with the idea of swapping them from time to time, because Weah has played left wing at club a few times this season. Pulisic always plays right wing at club, at least the majority of the time. That's where he's been most effective. So I think that's something worth considering, at least tactically. But for now, that's going to do it, guys. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this roster? What do you think of my analysis on it? Are there some players who you would have liked to see called up here? Are there some players who you're happy about their inclusion, happy about their exclusion? Another one I just remembered to mention that I forgot earlier, Leonard Maloney is also injured. I do think he also deserves a chance at some point, maybe as a CDM, maybe even try him as a center back, who knows? But for now, he is injured, so no chance for him there, unfortunately. But back to the outro. Let me know just all your overall thoughts on the roster and maybe some predictions for the games as well. When it gets closer to game time, we'll have previews for both of the games, obviously reactions for both of the games post-match. But just for now, thoughts on the roster. Do you like what Pochettino is doing, keeping continuity, or would you have maybe brought in some new names like Diego Luna, like Paxton Aronson, like Matt Freese, maybe like some other players as well? Just let me know in the comments. But that's all for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and we'll see you next time.